In talking about our licensing process, I think it's interesting to go back to really where that comes from. Congress passed the Commercial Space Launch Act back in 1984, and that put in place the requirement that any U.S. citizen or entity that wants to conduct the launch of a launch vehicle anywhere in the world needs to have a license from the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation. The only exceptions to that requirement are for launches that are being conducted by and for the government. So NASA did not need an FAA license to operate the shuttle. The Air Force doesn't need a license if they're carrying out the launch of one of their national security missions. But anybody else does. Just as an example, right now, when SpaceX and Orbital ATK are carrying cargo to the International Space Station, even though they're doing that for NASA, NASA isn't carrying out the operation. The companies are. So they need to have an FAA license, and that's what we put into place. The license process actually begins with something we call pre-application consultation. We invite the company in to talk to us about what they're trying to achieve. We then share in turn what to expect from our regulations, what we're looking for in their applications, and set expectations right at the beginning of the process. Once we've received their application, we actually conduct 5 different reviews as a part of our license determination process. There's a payload review to look at what they're carrying and why, a policy review in which we talk to other government agencies, NASA, DoD, State Department, the White House, and so forth, to see if there are any concerns about either national security or foreign policy that's in place. We have a safety review. Of course, that's very important to ensure public safety. We also have to follow NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, to make sure that there are no unknown environmental impacts to the proposed operation. And then finally, there's a financial responsibility review where the FAA goes through and adds up what the possible costs of a bad day after a launch might be, all the damage that might take place, and then we use that to establish a required amount of insurance that the launch operator has to go out and procure before the launch takes place. In terms of the financial responsibility, we look at the entire mission. So most of the time, the primary risk is right in the launch area because something can go wrong at launch, and with a lot of propellant on board, there's a high potential for casualties. But there can be problems due to overflight of other territory. If there were an explosion during launch, you can have shock waves go out and broken windows or other damage that could take place. And even during a reentry, if things don't go well, there could be impacts to the general public. For commercial space transportation operations today, we actually have a 3-tier system of liability and risk sharing. So the first tier involves the FAA establishing what is known as a maximum probable loss, what the value of potential damage or fatalities might be during an accident, and then requiring the company to obtain that amount of insurance up to a maximum of $500 million. In the event of a very bad day where the damage to third parties exceeded that level, then the Secretary of Transportation is authorized to go to Congress and ask for them to appropriate additional funds to reimburse those who are third party and who have experienced damage as a result of the launch. And that can be up to an amount of $1.5 billion. And if there was a very, very bad day and the damage exceeded even that amount, then the responsibility reverts to the launch operator and they would have to pick up the damages.